Hello, I'm Jeff Meisel, City Manager, and I would like to welcome you to this fiscal year 2023 budget presentation for the City of Bowling Green. The city's fiscal year, like most municipalities, begins on July 1st of each year and ends on June 30th of the following year. So we are fast approaching the end of FY23 and must adopt the next annual budget by ordinance with 2 readings by the end of next month. Before I get started, I would like to introduce the budget team that will follow me and help present the numerous parts of the budget in greater detail. The budget team is composed of Katie Schaller-Ward, Assistant City Manager and Chief Financial Officer for the City of Bowling Green, Aaron Holsey, Director of Human Resources and Risk Management, Aaron Ballou, Assistant Chief Financial Officer, and Sean Weeks, Assistant Chief Financial Officer. These 4 individuals devote countless hours to making this annual process a success, and I want to thank them for their hard work. I would especially like to thank Katie Schaller-Ward for her leadership with the budget process and for keeping us all on schedule for the delivery of this important document. The City Manager's fiscal 2023 budget recommendation that follows is intended to reflect the numerous budget priorities that were identified during the strategic planning process that began in early 2021. The adoption of an annual city budget each June may be the most important job we have as city officials. It is the blueprints and starting point for everything we intend to accomplish in the 12 months that follow starting July 1st each year. The city strategic plan that was formally adopted a few months back in February of 2022, this past spring, included input from our citizens, community leaders, city staff, senior managers, and most importantly, the elected Board of Commissioners that represent the city's 72,000 plus residents. This new strategic plan now provides the city's budget team, senior management, and city staff in all departments with a new framework to formulate budgeting priorities that will address the 8 pillars for growth, management, and implementation that were established in the 2022 to 2032 strategic plan. Here are the 8 pillars for growth, management, and implementation in no particular order. The first one, efficient governance. For many years, the city has lived within its means through the use of conservative revenue budgeting that focused on the core roles of city government, as well as continuous focus on cost containment of operating costs through the right sizing of city departments. As a result, we have accomplished good fiscal responsibility, economic growth, and exceptional quality of life, and the most efficient delivery of city services at the lowest possible cost. The FY 2023 budget reflects those same strategies. The budget team has examined projected revenues and projected expenditures to determine if revenue growth will adequately support the delivery of future demands on city services. Excluding the general fund, the city's main operating fund, there are another 90 funds in the city's accounting system in which the finance department maintains and accounts for revenues and expenditures that do not belong in the general fund. We do not spare any effort in accounting for every dollar to the lowest level of detail possible in order to provide accurate and timely financial reporting, resulting in a clean annual external audit that produces an award-winning, comprehensive financial annual report each year. The proposed FY23 budget represents a balanced budget for the general fund, which will not require the use of any fund balance. The 25% minimum fund balance in the general fund will remain intact, but there will be budgeted appropriations for the planned and appropriate uses of fund balance in some of the other funds of the city. The fund balances available in some of the capital project funds are a result of management's continued practice of pre-funding for future projects whenever feasible during the annual budget and through budget amendments approved by the Board of Commissioners. The FY 2023 general fund budget includes recommendations to honor our long-term commitments on debt service, equitable employee wages, mandatory employer contributions to the County Employees Retirement System, or CERS, now called Kentucky Public Pensions Authority, KPPA, also the workforce complement, and right-sizing our organization due to growth, as well as other personnel changes. Another pillar, Downtown development. Recent investments by the city to improve downtown infrastructure has put the downtown area in a great position for growth and development. The hiring of a downtown development coordinator during FY2022 should accelerate the plans for more special events and more recruitment of businesses downtown for downtown development. There is so much potential for Fountain Square Park and all of the other downtown blocks between Circus Square and the river. The plans for the recently approved Entertainment Destination Center, or EDC, are also taking shape, and funding for this new endeavor has been included in several areas of the FY23 budget. Another pillar, riverfront and greenways development. The Barron River that borders the north side of downtown has been an undeveloped asset for decades. The fact that part of the land on the north bank was formerly an old landfill site probably has not helped the area over the years either. Until now, unlike other towns with bordering rivers, we have never put any focus on the future further development of the rudimentary park along our river that is just 10 blocks from City Hall. There are greenway trails and paths present near the river, but they have been fragmented until recently. As one of the 8 pillars adopted in the strategic plan, riverfront and greenways development will now be a higher priority. The potential impact on the local economy and the quality of life for the residents and visitors could be significant if the riverfront is developed properly. Over the last few budgets, the city has set aside money to bring the dream of a beautiful park with safe access to the river closer to reality. The city was awarded a $750,000 grant to combine with a $1.5 million city match. The FY23 budget will reflect the first year of significant focus on riverfront development as well as continued connections of greenways throughout the city. Another pillar, technology and fiber optic internet infrastructure. With the help of Bowling Green municipal utilities and other internet providers, Bowling Green businesses have had good, fast fiber optic internet service for many years. The challenge has been with the fiber to the premises connection to many residential areas in the city. Many are still reliant on the 1980s coaxial cable for high-speed internet, which has many limitations. As part of the new strategic plan, there is a new focus on providing more options and more availability of faster, more affordable, high-speed internet to all residents. The city issued an RFP in March of 2022 to find a partner that could accomplish this goal for better technology that is still under review. As part of the FY23 budget, the city plans to allocate whatever is determined necessary from ARPA funding towards this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of having federal dollars to spend. We will also aggressively pursue any broadband grant funds from the state under House Bill 315 that allocated $300 million for these type projects. Besides this unique project, the city will continue to invest in its own IT infrastructure, which allows employees to be more efficient in their jobs. In the FY23 budget, you will also find appropriations for improved and enhanced technology for city departments. As always, we will pursue grant funding whenever possible. Housing development. Housing development has been identified as an immediate community need. A housing assessment was conducted in 2019 that showed a deficit in housing stock across all price points. The growing economy within the region is presenting a unique set of opportunities for Bowling Green. Although the city cannot build houses or apartments for our citizens and residents, it can strive to bring developers, rental property owners, financial institutions, community agency leaders, planning professionals together to address the general housing needs in the city. In the FY23 budget, we will continue our partnership with HUD for the Housing Choice Voucher Program, as well as leverage the CDBG funding with general fund funds for our neighborhood improvement program that includes housing rehabilitation. City workforce development, one of the 8 pillars. The city has always strived for a workforce that is committed, highly skilled, talented, as well as a representation of the community that it serves. The city has actively engaged in mentoring and developing programs to recruit, retain, and promote female and minority employees through relation-building events among the various departments. With the FY23 budget, City Management team has included some new strategies to remain competitive in wages with other cities, counties, and state agencies, particularly in the police department. Staying competitive with starting salaries and improving retention are top priorities. Today, in 2022, the labor market is not what it used to be, and the city must find creative ways, like everyone else, to recruit and retain talented employees to continue to provide the best possible service to our constituents. Transportation. Traffic congestion is the most frequent complaint from stakeholder groups, as well as the need for visionary planning and preparation to meet future needs of the city. The city works closely with Planning and Zoning's Metropolitan Planning Organization, also known as the MPO, as well as the State Highway Department District 3 office, to collaborate on how we can improve vehicular as well as pedestrian and other micro forms of transportation in our area. Meetings are held on a regular basis to share information and project statuses on state, city, county transportation projects, as well as planning for future projects. Public transportation has also been a top priority in recent years in regard to making it more effective and efficient for the residents that rely on it for transportation to work, healthcare, and shopping. The city contracted out the management services of the GoBG Transit a few years ago, as well as the operations side of the transit program. City staff works closely with both parties to continuously make improvements in every area possible. The FY23 budget contains appropriations that will help improve traffic congestion through some improvements to some city streets and intersections, as well as an improvement project to the GOBG Transit Center. Strong neighborhoods, another one of the 8 pillars. A sense of place and belonging are critical to the quality of life in a city. Strong, vibrant, and resilient neighborhoods are the foundation of community development. This was tested and proven to be true after the December tornado disasters. Neighborhoods also contribute to the diversity, growth, and long-term sustainability of a city. The FY23 budget provides various appropriations to help keep our neighborhoods strong and sustainable. Some other significant capital improvement projects that I want to talk about. The proposed FY23 capital improvement program will continue to address goals targeted in the 8 pillars of the strategic plan established by the Board of Commissioners, as well as needs in other areas. Many of the FY23 CIPs have already been listed among the 8 pillars of the strategic plan and discussed earlier. However, the largest and most significant CIP for FY2023 budget will be the new Public Safety Center on Porter Pike on the property that currently houses the Northside Fire Station number 5, and a new Transport Station number 8. Station 5 will be reconstructed and connected to a new training center. Total projected cost is approximately $20 million. That's for all of the capital projects for Station 5, the training center, and the Transport Station, Station 8. The new Police and Fire Training Center will be the home of the BG Police Academy, Bowling Green Fire Academy, and used as a training center and backup 911 dispatch center. It will be funded by numerous sources, including a potential long-term debt issuance supported by the Fire Improvement Fund and the General Fund. Before I hand off to my colleagues, just some final thoughts. After 2 years of the COVID pandemic and the most destructive tornadoes ever to hit our community, we are still BG strong. Our great city has certainly been tested over the last 2+ years, but Bowling Green is more resilient and more vibrant than ever. Our thoughts and prayers are still with those who lost loved ones to the pandemic and to the December tornadoes. The tornado disasters were certainly an historic event that produced an historic response by our community. Fortunately, our well-trained public safety departments, along with our 7 city departments, were ready for the unprecedented challenge and delivered the necessary services during a critical time. Our neighborhoods, local churches, local clubs, and nonprofit agencies really stepped up with an unprecedented response of donations and volunteer services to their fellow neighbors and residents and businesses during their time of need. The greatest lesson to be learned may be the indisputable fact that we all need each other and that Bowling Green is a truly unique and special place. With that being said, the FY23 budget is crafted to set the course for Bowling Green's continued recovery and the accelerated growth that is on the horizon. As mentioned earlier, the strategic plan that was adopted earlier this year will provide us with a roadmap for the next 10 years. Priorities could change as well as our financial situation, but the budget team believes that the FY23 budget will serve the city well and keep us on solid financial ground for the next fiscal year. We will always be a service organization which requires human capital to accomplish our mission. This budget reflects that investment, along with many others that align with the 8 pillars for growth, management, and implementation. Many thanks to the budget team, senior management, departmental budget representatives, and our dedicated city employees. This budget represents another great team effort across the whole organization. The City of Bowling Green remains committed to being community-led, service-driven, and powered by growth. The budget team stands ready and willing to assist the Board of Commissioners in its consideration and deliberation of this recommended budget. Thank you.
With a continued recovering economy, in addition to growth in several sectors, coinciding with newly announced business developments and expansions, a deep dive was conducted on the method used to determine the FY 2023 budget for the top 4 revenues during the city's economy. An updated approach was used which took an apples-to-apples comparison using 9 months of actual data over 3 fiscal years to craft a growth rate. That growth rate was then used to formulate the FY23 budget for each of the top 4 revenue categories. When reviewing this approach against previous years, the variance was reduced to under 1% for monthly withholdings, the largest driver for occupational fees. The analysis that was designed and implemented due to COVID-19 will remain in place to review in real time the actual revenues to make sure the projections continue on track throughout the fiscal year. Simply put, the presented FY23 revenue budget is the estimate of where the city will finish the year out, plus any possible sustainable growth in a few areas such as property taxes. Focusing on the revenue portion of the table, revenues for all funds is projected at approximately $155.9 million, a 27.4% increase compared to the FY22 adopted budget of $122.3 million. General fund revenue, including golf and aquatics, comes in at $86 million, or 13.7% increase versus the FY22 adopted budget. I want to note that the negative shown on this page is not deficit spending, but use of funds earmarked for capital projects both now and in the future. This slide represents comparison of all funds by revenue type. I want to draw your attention to the top 3 largest dollar changes. Occupational fees at $8.776 million, plus 16.1% due to newly created jobs, expansions, and increased wages for most sectors as they work to fill open positions. Notes and bond proceeds plus $15.45 million to fund new building projects and equipment, which will be detailed later on during the presentation. Transfers in at plus $6,222,000, or 36.8%, to help fund and pre-fund current and future projects and several capital projects. Note that all funds revenue drivers are occupational fees at 40.5% of the overall budget, taxes at 15.3%, and transfers in revenue at 14.8%. On the general fund side, withholdings and net profits makes up 70%, taxes is at 23.1%. Occupational fees had been at or above 70% from FY11 through FY18 and are now returning to that level. FY17 through FY21 shows steady growth, with FY21 actual revenue budget being the high water mark at 80.2%. The FY21 budget reflected a reduced revenue budget due to the uncertainty of COVID-19, with FY22 budget projecting a bounce back based on a strong FY21 collections. The FY23 recommended budget continues to echo the strong local economy as FY22 is shaping up to be a historically high year. Starting in 2013, this chart shows continued growth through FY21, with the exception of FY18, which had flat or no growth. Estimated increase for FY22 at plus 10%, with an average increase of 4.7% for total revenues through FY22. FY23 is budgeted at a slight 2.5% decrease due to the large end-of-year projected grant receipts. For occupational receipts, a 4% average increase for actual revenues through FY22 is shown, with FY23 budgeted at 4.7% growth. The budget for total property taxes reflects growth of 5.9% over FY22 adopted budget and 2.6% over FY22 estimated actual collections. This growth is based on changes in assessments for real property from the first recap provided by the Warren County Property Valuation Administrator, which is subject to change and state approval, growth in annexed areas, and new development added to the tax roll. Over the last 5 years, real property has grown an average of 6%, with a high being 7.4% in FY19 and the low being 4.4%, which is projected in FY22. Growth from FY14 at $34.1 million to estimated actual collections for FY22 at $46.7 million, total 3.6% average year-over-year gain for the 10-year period. The recommended FY23 budget of $49.9 million is $3.2 million or 6.9% more than FY22 estimated final revenue figures due to current and future job growth and company expansions coupled with increased wages. Growth from FY14 at $7 million to estimated actual collections for FY22 at $10.3 million, total 3.9% average year-over-year increase during the 10-year period. The recommended FY23 budget of $10.3 million is similar to FY17 and 21 in projected total due to the current economy and historical collection trends. The largest source of general fund revenues consists of net profits and employee wage withholdings. The budget reflects a 16.6% increase versus FY22 adopted budget and a 4.7% increase versus projected FY22 estimates. Historically, odd years have been greater revenue than even years. There typically has been growth when comparing odd and even years. FY23 is an odd year. However, due to a delay in some collections for local businesses affected by the December tornado, the best approach was to budget FY23, where FY22 estimates are expected to finish. As stated in my opening remarks, we are working to continually improve our projections each year to present the most researched and accurate figures possible. A review of the withholding budgeting process was done since the last 2 years of COVID has affected that process, but provided new and innovative ways at looking at data. This improved approach will allow us to make sure the budget to actual variance remains as small as possible. This slide displays the remaining general fund revenue sources. I want to draw your attention to the top two dollar changes between FY23 recommended and FY22 estimated actual. Grants at negative $5.916 million due to a large end-of-year FEMA grant collection projected. Most grants are added to the budget at time of award through the budget amendment process, not estimated and included at the beginning of the year. Transfer in at plus $663,000 or 134.3% represented increases to the Golf Fund and new funding to aquatics from the Heartland Taxing District. To recap, we are proposing a 13.7% increase in the FY23 recommended general fund revenue budget versus FY22 adopted, which is the direct result of a strong local economy backed by new and expanding businesses.
In turning our attention to the expenditure side of the equation, the recommended expenditure budget for fiscal year 2023 is greater than the fiscal year 2022 adopted budget for both all funds and general fund, which falls in line with the revenues. For all funds, we propose to increase the expenses by over $41 million or 33.5% and use almost $7.9 million of previously saved money to balance the all funds expenditure budget for capital projects and purchases. Just like revenues, general fund expenses will be approximately $10.4 million, or 13.7% more in the fiscal year 23 compared to fiscal year 22, and represents a balanced budget. The fiscal year 2022 adjusted expenditure budget includes carryovers from capital projects and open purchase orders from the current and prior years. However, we project to finish this year below $83 million in general fund expenses. As just stated, when comparing the fiscal year 2022 all funds recommended budget to the fiscal year 22 adopted budget, total expenses are up. By looking more closely at the different expenditure categories, this approximate $41.1 million change is mostly reflected in personnel, which is up $5.5 million, contractuals, which is up $27.4 million, supplies at $1.2 million, and transfers out makes up $7.1 million. Excluding capital items, the all funds operating budget totals $124.1 million, which is an increase of 12.1% or $13.4 million over the FY22 operating budget, which was just over $110.6 million. Public safety expenditures make up 39.2% of the all funds budget and 44.1% of the general fund budget. In the all funds budget, the other departments combined account for 36.4%, with the balance of 24.4% made up from transfers out, debt service, intergovernmental, agency services, and contingency. For the general fund, the other departments combined represent 34.7%, and transfers out, intergovernmental, agency services, and contingency allot for the remaining 21.2%. Although the general fund recommended expenditure budget is up 13.7% over the fiscal year 22 adopted budget, the $86 million is only about $1 million higher than the fiscal year 21 actual expenses, which totaled just under $85 million. As the expenditure budget is prepared, staff takes into consideration many factors, including fixed cost, historical trends, and actual needs versus wants, among other factors, to determine the most appropriate costs, and takes any opportunity to reduce budgets and extract savings when feasible and practical. Unfortunately, inflation has really hit the city hard, as it has every household and organization in the nation. Construction projects in particular are very difficult to estimate in the current environment, and most bids in recent months have all exceeded anticipated costs, with even longer lead times for materials compared to past years. When you take into account the projected revenues as previously presented, the fiscal year 23 recommended general fund expenditure budget covers all operating costs and proposes to include all capital improvement programs without impacting fund balance. Since the general fund accounts for 69.3% of the all funds budget, more detail is being provided regarding the recommended general fund expenditure budget for fiscal year 23. As a public safety and service-oriented organization, personnel are our most precious commodity and account for 61.8% of the fiscal year 2023 general fund budget. The graph compares the cost of total personnel versus actual total expenses. It also illustrates how slowly personnel expenses have grown over the past several years, only averaging around 4% per year from fiscal year 2014 through fiscal year 2021. Again, with personnel being the largest expense type in the general fund budget and reflects 11.1% increase overall for fiscal year 23 compared to the fiscal year 22 adopted budget, additional details about the contributing factors behind the personnel changes will be provided shortly. The majority of non-personnel expenditures are up primarily due to capital improvement projects and purchases. But more specifically, contractuals have grown by nearly $1.6 million in fiscal year 23, due to increases in software maintenance of about $188,000, travel and special education at about $139,000 for continuing employee development, investment charges for street lighting is up $60,000, vehicle maintenance is up $95,000, and the general fund portion of the energy savings capital maintenance project and other capital projects net out to about $1.1 million. Supplies increased due to inflation on normal everyday operating and maintenance supplies to the tune of about $72,000. Public safety supplies and uniforms are also up by $86,000, and small maintenance and capital asset purchases for police, fire, information technology, public works, parks, and the newly established Entertainment Destination Center added about $486,000 to the budget. The reduction in subsidies is related to an anticipated decrease in the next downtown TIF distribution, as well as less money recommended for airport grant assistance as compared to fiscal year 22. Fixed assets are down based on fewer capital purchases proposed for fiscal year 23 versus fiscal year 22. The miscellaneous line is primarily general fund contingency, and we'd like to have at least 1% of the budget represented in contingency for any unforeseen expenses that come up each year. The majority of the increase in transfers out is a direct result of more general fund support toward capital improvement projects and purchases at about $3 million. An increase in fuel expenses estimated at about $215,000, an increase in support to the property casualty fund of $50,000, which net against a decrease in the general fund support for debt service of a savings of $370,000 in fiscal year 23. Based on adopted eligible agency funding procedures included in the subsidies and assistance expenditure category are the city's 10 eligible agencies which provide services on behalf of the city. The recommendation regarding funding for these agencies in the coming year is to generally keep most agencies at the same level of funding as the previous year, and to place a 7% cap on the 5 agencies seeking more funding. Under this proposal, only 2 agencies would not receive the full amount requested, the Welfare Center and Operation Pride. The Welfare Center has more than made up for their requested amount through an additional $36,000 payment made by the city this month for excess gas franchise fee receipts collected. Additionally, there are a few other items which go along with agency funding. For the past several years, the city has traditionally provided a dollar-for-dollar match of employee pledges to United Way. This year's amount reflects a match of those pledges for which an employee did not receive any other city benefits, which is a $357 reduction from the fiscal year 22 budget. The city is also required to provide 2.5% of a local match for any FAA grant received by the Regional Airport Board. And this year's improvement project is for design services related to runway 3-21 and the terminal apron. This year's proposed improvement project match is about $47,000 less than the fiscal year 22 adopted budget amount. With these additions to the recommended amount just identified for eligible agencies, agency funding represents 1.3% of the general fund expenditures for FY23. Excluding capital expenditures, the FY23 general fund operating budget reflects an increase of 8.8% or $6.1 million compared to fiscal year 22's $69 million.
The FY23 budget is reflective of our commitment to current and future city employees, recognizing how valuable our human capital is to the operation of the city. I don't want to imagine the outcomes of the December tornadoes without the brave men and women of our police and fire departments that willingly walked into a war zone. Try to imagine going through another pandemic without engaging in clean parks and recreation programs, all of which are maintained by the city's 300 parks employees. Those snow and ice events this year, not to mention all the downed trees from raging storms, our Public Works Department responded with heroic actions to keep our roads and sidewalks safe for all. Every time something happened in our community this year, our residents and leaders all looked to the problem solvers and waymakers in the Neighborhood and Community Services Department. While not on the front lines, the heart of the city does not beat without the dedicated employees in finance, law, City Hall, IT, and human resources, taking care of people and processes to make sure everyone on the front lines could keep moving forward, rebuilding from disaster and pandemic, and bringing people together. Through our trials and challenges, we have definitely embraced the fact that people are what matter. This budget takes an aggressive approach on ensuring the men and women who serve the city of Bowling Green are compensated fairly. The FY23 budget includes recommendations for a cost of living adjustment for full and part-time employees, new positions, position upgrades, and adjusted schedules for the police department and part-time and seasonal employees. For years, the city has managed to keep a gap between the city's largest source of revenue, occupational fees, and the city's largest expense, personnel services. This year, that balance continues. While the gap is shrinking in comparison to previous years, the growth in withholdings should continue to support the cost of personnel expenses. Nobody has been unaffected by the inflation we're experiencing in our economy. Everything from gas to a gallon of milk, lumber, and services are affecting the way we spend and live. After many years of slow and steady cost of living increases, the city is boldly matching the Consumer Price Index for calendar year 2021. In addition, the city is still recommending that we continue with the STEP program, which will increase employee wages another 1 to 1.6%. In FY23, we have taken a fresh look at Schedule U that covers part-time, seasonal, and temporary employees. We combined the first 4 grades and brought the minimum starting wage to $12 an hour. The scale will be reviewed again in FY24 as we take a multi-year approach to increasing this wage scale. Like full-time employees, part-time and eligible employees will also be eligible for a STEP. Our permanent part-time and returning seasonal employees will be eligible for an additional 25-cent STEP raise. In addition to adjusting salaries of current employees by 7%, the pay classification schedules covering non-hazardous full-time employees, department heads, and the sworn fire department is also being adjusted by 7% in starting pay and the STEP increase. The sworn police department schedule is increasing the starting grade, P1, to $51,500. Additional increases to grades P2 and P3 are being recommended to decrease the compression between the grades. We will continue to look at public safety schedules and recommend more adjustments in the future. In FY23, we are recommending 8 positions to be upgraded. In addition, there are 6 job titles that are being modified and 2 position titles without any financial impact. The budget includes a recommendation for 12 new full-time positions. FY23 will be year 1 of 2 in hiring 15 new firefighters to staff Station 8 at the Trans Park. We will be hiring 8 in FY23 and 7 in FY24. By continuing to add stations and crews, the training division is maxed out and needs additional personnel to support their department. Another training captain will be added and will also act as a peer support coordinator. Another position being recommended is a second fire code inspector. The workload of the fire code inspectors grows as the city grows. The inspectors review all building plans and have a growing number of buildings that are high priority for annual inspections. This division is expected to continue to grow in the future. Reliance on technology is increasing every day. We are recommending to add a systems analyst to share the burden of work and keep the city moving forward with safety and security in mind. The HR department will be adding a benefits coordinator to replace our benefits manager, who will be shifting to the HR manager position to help in the city's recruitment and employee relations. These new positions will bring the full-time complement to 512 employees. The census from 2020 put Bowling Green at a 25% growth rate over a decade. In 2010, there was 1 full-time employee serving 120 residents. In 2020, we were up to 140 residents per full-time employees. In public safety, we had 1 full-time first responder to every 197 residents, and now we're closer to 1 first responder to every 224 residents. Public safety continues to be our highest priority in Bowling Green, and this budget is a reflection of our commitment to service and protect our city's residents and their property. The retirement system is still in the midst of a transition. In 2020, the state passed House Bill 484, which created a separate board over CERS. That board went into effect a year ago. In FY23, the rate for non-hazardous is flat, and the rate for hazardous will increase 12%. We believe this is the final 12% increase. This chart shows the growth of retirement as an expense to the city in the last 7 years and the anticipated leveling off in FY24. The city is in the 3rd year with a reference-based medical plan. 75% of city employees are on this plan. Despite an increase of claims, this reference-based plan is saving the city 12% in comparison to the PPO plan. In addition, the city's new prescription benefit manager and closed formula is saving the city approximately $327,000 in rebates. The city is still working through the transition to a new prescription plan, and it's too early to know the impact of those changes. Employee and city premiums for the medical and vision plans will increase slightly in FY 2023. The city premiums for dental will also increase, but the employee premiums will remain the same. The City Care Center Management Group, Care Here, was acquired by Premise Health in 2021, and we have just completed the transition to their EMR. Dr. Davidson continues to work in the clinic on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. Our nurse holds nurse-only hours on Fridays from 8 to noon. This budget does not include a recommendation to change our current schedule. Our stop loss will be recommended with an 8% renewal and is part of the $1 million in fixed costs that the city pays at 100% through position budgeting. The graph shows the breakdown of the personnel expenditures by department of all funds on the left and the general fund on the right. The cost of personnel expenditures is $57 million in all funds and is 63% of the general fund.
The city's Capital Improvement Program, or CIP, is the annual plan of project expenditures for public facilities and infrastructure. It shows estimated costs and sources of funding for all city projects costing over $25,000 and with an estimated useful life of at least 5 years. In FY 2023, the CIP budget totals over $47.8 million, which is $26.4 million more than last year. This significant increase is primarily due to over $20 million of public safety projects, which will be detailed in an upcoming slide. The CIP total this year includes $9.4 million toward debt service payments for previous projects, $9.5 million of general fund support, and new this year is $15.45 million of new debt. On this chart, notice the debt service to CIP ratio has decreased to 19.8% from over 47% last year. This is a result of an increase in projects and the use of cash rather than debt to fund CIP. However, this ratio is expected to rise at least to previous year levels in future years after this year's recommended debt is issued and payments become due. The proposed total CIP budget of $47.8 million is a substantial increase over last year and is the largest CIP budget in recent history. It outpaces the low point in FY 2010 by over 210% and also exceeds the previous high year in 2007 by over 43%. The CIP budget for new projects only, excluding amounts to repay debt, is over $38 million and ties back to 4 broad goals, which are municipal facilities and equipment, community livability, traffic and roads, and technology improvements. This year, the largest impact of the CIP program will be toward municipal facilities and equipment, with 77.5% of spending dedicated to those projects. I'll review the more significant capital improvement projects being recommended on the next several slides, and more detailed information on each project is found in your budget book in Appendix E. Facilities and equipment equates to $29.7 million of the capital project budget, and $20.3 million of that is dedicated to the construction of a new fire station at the Transpark, construction of an expanded public safety training center, reconstruction of the Northside Fire Station, and the purchase of a new fire apparatus for the new Transpark station. The construction projects are still in the design phase, but are expected to break ground as soon as fall of this year. Funding for this large portion of the CIP budget will be comprised of both cash and debt. This will be the first occurrence of new debt for a city construction project since 2008. Keep in mind the city has issued debt for the purchase of new fire trucks and for other entities, such as the ITA, but this is the first debt issued for a city construction project since 2008. Debt proceeds will fund $15.45 million of the projects. The general fund will contribute just over $1.9 million, and special revenue funds will provide $3 million of reserves. For more information on this project and all CIP projects, please remember to see Appendix E. Facilities and equipment projects also include the Energy Savings Project, which will be led by the Public Works Department, and it's the second largest CIP at $5.5 million. This project will address the replacement of heating and cooling units at multiple city buildings, upgrade existing lighting to LED, and potentially take advantage of solar energy. The city will be guaranteed a utilities cost saving with this project. Over $1.5 million is allocated for the purchase or replacement of new vehicles and equipment with this budget. 16 new vehicles are being recommended, with 8 being dedicated to the police department as patrol vehicles. The other notable recommendation is to replace a front-end loader in the operations division that is over 15 years old. Community livability projects seek to enhance the quality of life in the local community through strong neighborhoods, walkable spaces, and recreational offerings. The FY23 Capital Improvement Plan budget allocates $3.9 million to this goal. The largest piece of this $3.9 million is for downtown improvements. A thriving downtown has been a goal for many years and is supported by this project through streetscape improvements. Phase 3 is set to begin and will extend these improvements from downtown to the riverfront area or up to WKU. $1 million is again being allocated for sidewalks and greenway path development. These programs were created to foster a walkable city by providing sidewalks in areas where none had existed, to replace existing sidewalks to eliminate trip hazards and comply with ADA standards, and to close gaps in the city's multi-use path or greenways network. The Bowling Green Reinvestment Area Neighborhood Improvement Program completes the community livability goal with a budget of $741,000. This is comprised of $200,000 in general funding and $541,000 from CDBG federal grant funds. The next goal addressed with the Capital Improvement Program is traffic and roads, with a recommended budget of $3.9 million. $2 million of that total is dedicated to street resurfacing or overlay program, or the overlay program, with $1 million provided from the general fund and $1 million from state tax revenues. This program was reinvigorated in 2006, and since that time, over 200 miles of roadway has been resurfaced and funding has topped $23.1 million. FY23 will be the second and final year of funding for the construction of roundabouts along Weston Avenue, with an additional budget of $1.2 million for 3 new roundabouts. During FY22, funding was provided for the design and construction of a roundabout at Rockingham and Weston. $650,000 is being provided in FY23 for other intersection and road improvements, including the Ashley Circle intersection, 5 additional intersections, and an extension of Green Hill Street. The final goal addressed by the FY23 CIP is technology improvements, which has a total budget of just over $872,000. The most notable technology project is for the replacement of body and in-car cameras for the police department. This will upgrade existing equipment, provide new features, and will be phased in over 5 years. This chart shows the CIP funding history since 2014. Of note, you can see general fund contributions reached a low of $1.2 million in 2021 and have grown to $9.5 million this year, shown by the olive green line at the bottom of the chart. Also, it's easy to see the significant increase in CIP funding for FY23, which is driven by the public safety construction projects, reflected by the dark green line at the top. Conversely, the debt-only portion or debt service payments for previous CIP projects has been decreasing steadily. This is visible as the gray line in the middle and shows that the city has been using cash to fund CIP rather than issuing debt. However, this line will see an upward trend in future years after the new debt being recommended is issued. In review, the FY23 Capital Improvement Program has a total budget of $47.8 million, which is $26.4 million or 103.4% more than last year. The general fund balance is untouched again for the 9th consecutive year. And new this year, debt financing is being recommended. Over $15.4 million will finance a portion of the previously mentioned public safety construction projects. Funding sources for the FY23 CIP include this new debt as the largest portion at 32.3%, followed by reserves and special revenue funds, general fund contributions, previously issued debt, and a small amount of reserves from enterprise and internal service funds. This slide highlights the debt funded by the general fund only. Payments made by any city special revenue funds like the Fire Improvement Fund or payments provided by outside entities such as Warren County or WKU are excluded. The FY22 estimated actual column is on target with budget at over $4.1 million, which equates to about 5.1% of total general fund expenditures. In FY23, the general fund spend for debt service is recommended to be just under $3.8 million, which is a one-year savings of $342,000. The FY23 budget includes no new general fund debt yet. The repayment of the proposed debt will be reflected in future budgets after FY23. The full funding picture of the city's debt service is shown here. The total FY23 debt service from all funding sources is $9.4 million and includes the general fund, which covers 40.1% of the total budget, or just under $3.8 million, reimbursements from WKU and Warren County at 33.6%, and special revenue funds, such as the Fire Improvement Fund and Job Development Incentive Fund, which totaled 26.3%, or $2.5 million. The city's 10-year outstanding debt history is shown here. The most notable aspect of this chart is the $43.8 million that was issued in March of last year for the ITA to expand the Kentucky Trans Park. Another jump is expected in FY23 for the issuance of debt recommended in this year's budget. Also, it is important to note of the city's estimated $91.1 million in outstanding debt at June 30th, $72.8 million, or right at 80%, was financed or issued for other entities, including WKU, Warren County, and ITA, for projects like the ballpark and the Trans Park. Debt issued by the city for city projects totals over $18 million, or just at 20% of the city's outstanding debt. Now switching gears to the FY23 General Fund fund balance. Fund balance is defined as the remaining equity balance after all budgeted expenditures have been made. The FY23 beginning fund balance is estimated to be about $37 million and is based on staff revenue and expenditure forecasts through June 30th. Committed fund balance is a reserve balance equal to 25% of the recommended FY23 general fund revenue budget, or about $21.5 million. This is an increase of almost $2.6 million from the current balance due to the increased FY23 revenue budget compared to last year. The assigned fund balance of $5 million is an estimate of open purchase orders to be moved to FY23 and approved carry-forward projects remaining open at June 30th. This is more than in the past due to several projects yet to begin and an increase in open purchase orders. No use of fund balance is again recommended for FY23. The last use of general fund balance in the budget was in FY 2014. The unassigned fund balance of $10.5 million will be available in FY23 for any unbudgeted major purchases, infrastructure repairs, or other significant events. This equals approximately 12% of the FY23 general fund expenditure budget.
The budget team would like to extend our appreciation to graphics designer Laura Harris for this year's budget and presentation design. And I would like to recognize Erin Ballou, Megan Van Meter, and Jennifer Lightfoot for their work with the development of this year's budget summary document, as we try each year to keep it relevant and relatable for public consumption. The first reading of the budget ordinance will be presented at the June 7th regular Board of Commissioners meeting, along with other related items for consideration. Second reading is anticipated for the June 21st regular board meeting to finalize the budget and related documents and to approve agency appropriations.